the exodus of Israelites from Egypt, the truth versus narrative. So, the foundation story of Israel is that the Israelite people were enslaved in Egypt, and then they were they were freed by Moses, who took them to freedom. They crossed the Red Sea because Moses parted the Red Sea. They crossed the Red Sea and they came into the Sinai Peninsula. And they spent decades wandering the Sinai Peninsula and eventually populated Israel. So that is the national foundation story of Israel. Okay. Now, what's the truth is the question. The truth, first you ask yourself, do we have any archaeological evidence of the presence of Jewish people in ancient Egypt before, let's say, 1000 BC? Actually, you don't. There's no hard, unambiguous archaeological evidence of any presence of Israeli or Jewish people in Egypt before 1000 BC. You do have the Hyksos. Okay, the Hyksos who invaded and occupied Egypt for a century and a half. The Hyksos. Okay, let's go to that, which I've spoken about in the past. The Hyksos, they ruled Egypt between 1630 and 1523. And some historians interpret the Hyksos as a Semitic people. Okay, Semitic people. Because the Hyksos had war chariots, they had double curved bows, they brought in new technology like the axe and the bow, and they had a storm god or a thunder god. They brought in horses. But if you look at the characteristics of the Hyksos, they could very well also be Aryan people. And actually, they seem more like Aryan people than Semitic people. Right? But the consensus right now is that the Hyksos were Semitic people. But the Hyksos were invaders and rulers. How would they be slaves? But the Hyksos eventually were defeated and went back. But maybe some of them did not go back and maybe they were enslaved. So that is a very far-fetched interpretation. The Hyksos, from the way I see it, were not Semitic. They were more of Indo-Iranian or something. Because at the same time, you very soon you have the Mitanni and the Hittite empires that come up north of Sinai in Anatolia, which seem to have the same culture as the Hyksos. But the mainstream consensus is that the Hyksos were Semitic people, maybe Babylonian people. Maybe the god they worshipped was Baal, the storm god, but not the thunder god of the Aryans. Not that. So if you were to claim that the Hyksos were related to the Israelite people and they were enslaved, that is incredibly far-fetched. We also know that you had the Israeli people who existed maybe around 1300 BC or something in what is now Israel, that region. So if they already existed there, how do you have them enslaved in Egypt? So it doesn't really add up. But that doesn't mean it did not happen. Maybe a small number of Jewish people were indeed potentially enslaved in Israel, in Egypt, maybe 1500 BC or thereabouts. And maybe they were able to escape eventually. And their story became the national founding story of Israel. Perhaps. That is speculation. But from the perspective of hard evidence, we don't have any hard evidence of Jewish people being enslaved in Egypt. There's no hard evidence. It doesn't mean that it did not happen, but there's no hard evidence.